Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Environmental Coffeehouse. It's me, Sandy Schoelles, and Jennifer Hynes tonight, and we have
Hey.
an interesting evening tonight, guys. And let's give a shout out to who's here. Anthony Davis and Book Hermit and Valhalla's with us, and Dee Dee. Hi, Dee Dee Sunbeam. How nice to see you. This is great. And I'm sure people will join. Keith Boyd's here and Gary Jones. So good. And Head the Box. Hi, Brian. Oh, Lord. This is going to be fun. All right. Jennifer's going to start out with something. And it's an interesting article that we found this week. And it is, which one? Jennifer, you got it because I'm going to put up
Yeah,
the graphic. You start that article and talk about the ice, and I'll get the picture up.
absolutely. This is for all the ice nerds out there. Those of us who keep looking at this event, the collapse of our biosphere and our planet. And every so often you get to see something new. So this is up in the Arctic, in the Russian Arctic, and it says a never before seen event is collapsing an ice sheet in the Russian Arctic. So Sandy is going to try and
It's
get
up.
that graphic up. Is it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, terrific. And this is basically an ice stream within an ice sheet, and it's the result of an ice glacial surge. So apparently, back in 2013, even though the graphic says 2018, this thing is still happening. So it's just a particularly good picture. And I think it kind of looks like a heart. And you see that dark place where it's going out into sea. That's the ice stream within this ice sheet, and it's the result of a glacial surge. So back in 2013, there was a vast glacial surge, and you can see the result of the resulting ice stream. And for the first time, scientists think they're watching a fast moving river of ice being born. So I guess after the glacial surge, when just tons and tons of this glacier broke off and started flowing to the sea, it sort of recoalesced and turned into a permanent feature. And it's this ice stream. And you can see the dark places right there along the sides. That's kind of the margins, very hard margins of that
I
ice stream.
can't make it big. Okay, there we go.
Oh, it's good. Ah, oh my goodness.
It went teeny weeny. Now it's big.
What's it have? So, sorry, frivolity aside, I always think that these types of things are very interesting to know about. And um, so it's at a place called Vavilov Ice Cap, somewhere up in the Russian Arctic. And it's traveling at about 12 meters a day down on the bottom part and maybe about 6 meters a day up in the top part. And they say that this is a key piece of evidence that the surge, the glacial surge, has turned into an ice stream. And they show these different kind of parts of it where it's got these dark spaces kind of at the edge, kind of like almost like there's a cliff alongside a river. And it's a brand new phenomena that hasn't really been seen in the past. Brought to you, care of the human race and our fossil fuel emissions, which is heating up the planet. And so now we've got, an ice stream that we've seen be born. And I think that's kind of interesting, actually. So that's pretty much it for the ice stream, Sandy.
Okay, well, I'll come back. Yeah, we have a few things. I thought it was really interesting too, the whole article on it that it's we put the stuff in the we put the links in for you guys so you can see them. And we thought then, since we were looking at that one, which Jennifer so wonderfully described, that we would segue over to another interesting article from the week. And I'm sure that if I could
A
find
little
it.
piece of doom.
Here we go, a little piece of doom. And that is the Counterpunch article by Robert Hunziker. We all know and love Robert Hunziker, right? He's a good writer, and he's a scary writer. So we're not going to go through the whole article, but we both have pieces that we like, and you guys can read it. You can go over to I don't know if he did it on Collapse Chronicles and watch Sam Mitchell read it, or but it was really interesting, and I'm going to start with, because this really interests me, the part where he's talking about, in short, the world is on a colossal fossil fuel growth phase in the face of stark warnings from scientists that emissions must decline to net zero. Otherwise, the planet is destined to turn into a hothouse. As things stand today, it appears hothouse is baking into the cake. And hothouse implies too much heat disrupting and destroying too many ecosystems for the planet to support 7.8 billion people. Now, the reason why I picked that particular paragraph was because we constantly see how every country is wanting to drill and dig, and in the United States, in fact, the other day I sent my comment in to keep Tongass National Forest in Alaska from having roads and being destroyed for logging. The last day for those public comments was, I thought it was Wednesday maybe. And in Russia, how the icebreakers, they don't even need the icebreakers. They're going through the Arctic. Everybody's looking. Norway's looking. The United States, everybody wants a little piece of the Arctic, right, Jen? So that's what's
Absolutely.
particularly interesting to me, because it's
Oh,
it's the world oligarchies. It's the world fossil
yeah.
fuel
They're
industry.
they're they're carving it up, and they want to mine the methane hydrate as well, which I think is just like absurd. It's such an explosive substance, right? It's got a lot of
Yeah,
energy, and it's powerful. It burns, it creates energy. So they want to mine the methane hydrate as well as the oil. And as the Arctic melts more and more, it becomes more available. So just wait till they carve into a big methane deposit and the whole thing just goes up.
right.
Really?
Yeah, really. Well, you got your part on this article, the
Oh,
barrel.
right. Yeah.
So
So
take
this
it
is
off.
this is a continuation.
And I'm just trying to get everybody's comments to come out. The color screwed up, so I can't get anybody's comments to show.
Oh dear. All right.
It's okay.
Um, but this is the Robert Hunziker article
Mm-hmm.
continuing on. And I think that this article is brilliant because he goes into that video that was done by Professor Peter Carter. And that's where Peter Carter was talking about, nobody's treating this like an emergency, and these methane emissions that are happening up in Barrow, Alaska, like these unending methane emissions in Barrow, Alaska, are going almost unreported. So he talks a little bit about this right here. So here it is. Furthermore, and chillingly, according to Dr. Carter, there has been a massive ongoing eruption of methane in the Arctic. It's gone practically unreported. The only report of it was by the Engineering and Technology Journal. Barrow, Alaska registered the aforementioned massive bursts of methane into the atmosphere starting off in August. So these massive methane eruptions just north of Barrow, Alaska in the sea started in August, and they're still going on. So started in August of this year. Again, we've
Mm-hmm.
never seen anything like it,
Mm-mm.
and it has stayed at elevated levels to the present week. Looking at the 2.2 million year ice core, maximum methane concentration ever was 800 parts per billion. In Barrow, Alaska, it is 2,050 parts per billion and staying there. It's been up there for 4 months. And this is exactly what everybody has been saying. You know, Dr. Peter Wadhams, Natalia Shakova, Igor Semeletov,
Yep.
Peter Carter, all these scientists have been saying and warning about the methane eruptions that can happen, especially if they're in sort of shallow water. Those methane emissions are going to reach the atmosphere. And, you know, keep in mind, in the Siberian Arctic shelf, it's between 50 and 100 meters deep, and that's extremely shallow. So all those deposits of methane permafrost are heating up, and there are huge giant fountains and plumes of methane going on right now at this very minute, right now, in the Siberian Arctic shelf. And they're going into the atmosphere, and this one in Barrow, Alaska, on the other side of the Arctic, is going into the atmosphere, and it's been going off for 4 months. Who knows what set it off? Maybe we got to a threshold up there where it suddenly was constantly above 0 degrees centigrade or whatever, and the permafrost around this deposit melted. But whatever it is, this giant methane eruption is happening in Barrow, Alaska, and keeping the methane, the local methane levels, at 2,050 parts per billion. So this is definitely going to be a source of global warming. So I'd like to read this next part, which is an ominous warning that has the potential to be a precursor to runaway global warming, burning off mid-latitude agriculture and categorizing the tropics as way too hot for life. So everything that they're saying is pointing to a hothouse Earth and runaway global warming due to the self-reinforcing feedbacks. And remember, feedback loops. And remember what we were talking about last week. We were saying that the permafrost itself, which is thawing right now and emitting a tremendous amount of carbon dioxide and methane, that when you put all the emissions of the permafrost currently, it is the size of the nation of Japan's emissions.
Oh boy.
It's just amazing to me. So, you know, one more little paragraph here, Sandy, then I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, go for it.
We Carter, and the scientific community know that really bad things are happening in the Arctic. We also know the land permafrost is emitting a lot of methane, CO2, and nitrous oxide, another global greenhouse gas, global warming greenhouse gas. 12 times more than scientists estimated. So, I mean, we're not talking about like 50% more than they thought. It's not like, oh, we thought this was going to be bad, but it's actually 50% worse than we imagined. It means that scientists have no clue what's going on because the emissions are 12 times more than the scientists estimated. I mean, just think about that for a little bit. I mean, that's like, you can't even understand it. That's like magnitudes, right?
Right.
So in conclusion, COP25 is a farce as major countries ignore the threat. So this is like conscious ignorance. Ignore the threat of global warming by upping the ante on fossil fuels, adding near $2 trillion worth of new fossil fuel infrastructure since the Paris 15 climate accord warned of dangers associated with too much carbon in the atmosphere. A surefire recipe for hothouse Earth.
Wow.
It's pretty much stunning, right?
Robert.
It's pretty much stunning.
Do you want to take a question?
Is there a question? Sure, absolutely.
Yes. Keith Boyd's question is for Jennifer. Have they estimated the amount of CO2 released from all the bush and forest fires globally yet?
Wow. I don't know how you could get that number, but the fires are getting really, really, really scary. God, I saw some footage from Australia, which is in critical drought, and the fires are like fire nados. Have you seen those
Yeah.
fire nados? They're
Yep.
just unbelievable. I myself haven't heard of a cumulative number. I guess you'd really have to sort of guesstimate that number, putting all of the fires and the trends together. So unfortunately, Keith, I'm sorry, I don't know the if
Oh, but
that's
we'll
been.
get it for next week's show. I mean, seriously, Keith, just make sure you get that to me and we will look for the answer. Or I will look for the answer and help Jennifer when she's working, since I lay around feeling like shit all the time. I thought I'd,
Yeah.
just put that in and make you all feel so sorry for me. Nah, I'm not a victim. But actually, that was a good one. I mean, Robert writes well. He felt, and so
Oh,
many
he
of these
does.
people. He says, lest we forget, Venus, our sister planet, has 96.5% CO2 by volume. And we're not saying it's only, climate change that's ruining the earth. I mean, of course, it's ecocide. It's it's
Hmm.
it's it's all the crazy things going on in, as I say all the time, our oceans are being destroyed. It's plastic side, it's soil aside, it's everything. It's pesticides. It's what
It's the
it's
whole crush of
the whole thing.
civilization. And climate change is a very strong factor, but there are other
Mm-hmm.
factors, of course, as we know. It's just like the perfect storm, and I think a lot of us know that we're sort of in this last moment, before things really kind of start to crumble if you
Yeah.
just look at the science. But they're actually kind of hiding science. It's like there wasn't much in evidence at the COP25. I heard about that they really didn't talk about the science. It's kind of like
Business
science is not in
opportunity.
vogue. So,
Or
science is not in vogue or believed necessarily.
no.
So, just a postscript on this Robert Hunziker article:
Mm-hmm.
accelerating heating of the Arctic Ocean could make global temperatures skyrocket in a matter of years.
Wow. And
I
that's
know.
Zoc says in 2021 is probably the last year we're going to be called Americans. Oh,
Oh.
boy, Zox. I don't know why that just popped out at me. I thought you were going to say something about it was like the Americas, because we're going to change so much. So
Yeah.
much. Um, well, okay. So, guys, everybody's always saying that we never find anything positive or solution focused. And we found something that was really interesting. And actually, today I don't have this in the, I put the link in. I didn't put the link into this yet. But the
Mhm.
article is called A Fleet of These Giant Iceberg Making Submarines Could Refreeze the Arctic. Now, you could say, oh my God, that's head up your ass stuff, or, hopium, whatever you want. It was interesting. And Jen, you want to start with the first little paragraph, and then we'll get the video too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I'd just like to say these people are trying to reestablish the ice of the Arctic with massive hexagonal shape icebergs. And even though it sounds like it couldn't really work, and maybe it can't long term because the Arctic Ocean is, in fact,
Heat.
hot, it's getting hotter,
Yeah.
which is not good. It's bad when the Arctic Ocean gets hot. But, I think at least they're trying, and it could delay these methane emissions if they're able to create enough of these giant hexagons of ice. So, with that, let's just take a look at it. It's not a very long article, and Sandy's going to try and play this little
I'm
video
not
that
going to
goes
try. I'm
along with
going to
it as
do it.
well. You're going to do
Gonna
it?
do
Okay,
it.
cool. Cool. Well, while you do that, I'm gonna just take off the first paragraph of this article.
Go for it.
While
You
the
lead.
whole
I'm all
world
set up for
is
when we're ready.
okay, cool. While the whole world is frantically planting trees to combat global warming, a team of Indonesian designers has presented a cooler approach, an iceberg making submarine. And they show it having like a fleet of these things, like 3 or 4 of them or something. Looking at the predicament from a different perspective, the team led by Faris Rajak, and I'm not going to even try and say that other last name, thought, why not tackle global warming by refreezing the Arctic? More ice would reflect heat and keep the planet cooler. Well, of course, he's absolutely right, because if he's able to create a whole bunch of these icebergs continually, and he has a little fleet of these little submarines creating ice, then it kind of delays the inevitable, at least puts it off. And I say anything to extend the health and the life of the Arctic is critical, because as goes the Arctic, so
Right.
goes the world. Yeah.
Want me to
So
read this next one?
yeah.
Did I cut you off? Sometimes it's hard when we're doing
No,
live stream. Okay.
no,
The,
go ahead.
the master plan calls for a fleet of the vessels to be deployed in the Arctic to create miniature icebergs and transform seawater into new ice fields. Did you read this? No.
No.
Okay. The modular hexagonal shape of the icebergs mean they can lock into one another and form massive ice sheets, new ice flows over time. Now, Jen, you can take that on, and I'm going to get the video up
Okay.
now. I think it'll be. I think
Okay.
we'll have fun watching this.
Yeah, this is from the journal Intelligent Living. I think it's got great graphics and pretty pictures. Not pictures of these submarines because they don't really exist yet, but at least they did good graphics and animations on it. So Sandy's going to try and bring that up. The
I hope it's up.
re-iceberg. Now listen to this word. Have you ever heard of this word before? The re-icebergization concept is a proactive report or a response to the matters related to the melting of our planet's polar ice. The designers noticed that so much focus had been placed on protecting cities from rising sea levels, but none on stopping it in the ocean. So they're actually trying to do something to mitigate the onset of sea level rise due to escalating temperatures by keeping the Arctic in a healthier state. Oh, you got that move going. That's great. So how it works, the vessel submerges to collect seawater within its central hexagonal well-like tank. The vessel rises back to the surface of the sea. The tank full of water is covered to shield it from the sun and speed up the process. Reverse osmosis then would filter out some of the salt from the water, so it desalinates it and further speed up the process because fresh water freezes easier than salt water. Turbines would then be employed, blasting the tanks with cold air and accelerate the freezing procedure after about a month. So it takes a month for one of these icebergs to get created. The water is frozen and the vessel submerges again. As it sinks, it releases the ice baby and refills with more seawater to start the process all over again. So I just think that that's an amazing sort of very unique sort of solution that I never even thought of before, just to create these little ice babies and put them all together, and then you have ice sheets. Will they melt? Yes, of course they'll melt, but they look like they're actually deeper than the mean what do you call it, volume, kind of like depth of the Arctic ice. So an ice baby has a volume of 2,027 cubic meters. So that's fabulous, so that's like 2 kilometers. How could that be? That's crazy. No, I think I'm misunderstanding it, but it's got 2,000 cubic meters, so it's a sizable chunk of ice. And clustered together, they form a honeycomb pattern, and their volume can be infinitely expanded, forming more massive ice flows, growing so long as the vessel keeps making ice babies. So
Mark
you have
says, go to Patreon to sponsor your personal octagonal iceberg.
So at least they're trying, right? I mean,
Yeah.
good for them. At least they're coming up with a
Yeah.
solution.
I
And
mean,
just
it's
like
cool.
it is cool, at least they're doing something. And just like Patrick McNulty with his ocean tunnel system, which, I mean, who knows? I mean, it could work. I think at
He
least this is
wanted to show
something
you something.
this is at least something that could kind of make the inevitable kind of delay it, right? So that's
Well, it's
the other.
just the human ingenuity. People are always going to try, even if it's something that, they're always going to put forth plans. They're always going to try. A lot of us here already know where we are. We already know the tipping points, but we thought we would present something this time, a little bit different. Just something that shows you that that we don't always think of just that. We're in near term human extinction or the sixth mass extinction, but that there are people out there that have those things going on. Of course, it's going to be crazy expensive. Of course, it's going to be like, who knows if it can even work? But they did put out a pretty good video, right?
Yeah, they did. They put out a great video. It has great graphics, and
Yeah.
it's kind of cute to have like a fleet of these little ice baby submarines
Right.
creating these little ice chunks,
Our chat's going nuts. Mark says, if I sponsor an iceberg, can I name it after my dog? So we'll all have to come up with the money to sponsor an iceberg.
Well, see, I mean, that could be like a whole new thing. Make it very groovy. You could make yourself little kind of
Yeah.
rubber, kind of blue, translucent. I sponsored an iceberg. His name is Ken, or whatever.
Yeah. And what Pascal said, it takes serious energy to make ice. That's Santa's wish list.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, geez. I mean, and then
yeah,
Kent saying, fun thinking. How many do we need? A couple 100,000 ice making submarines?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, probably not realistic. And as we all know, the Arctic's getting a lot hotter because
Hi,
it's
Chris.
being heated up by, hot waters coming in up by Alaska, hot waters going in by all the different rivers, hot water's going in because there's less sea ice cover, and that kind of heats up the water. So we know that the Arctic Ocean's getting warmer. Oh, not to mention the localized methane flares that are heating up areas locally and making hot spots. So, I mean, at least I'm not like a huge believer. I'm not
No.
like, I can't be. I'm trying. I would love to be. I hope, it's so funny when people first consider our predicament and they don't really get the scale of it. Like, I
Yeah.
was talking to a guy at work and he's like, "Well, we'll just throw technology at this problem of global warming. We've done it before with
Like
other
we
things.
just
We'll just."
presented.
And so he's in the technology will fix it thing because he hasn't really looked at it. He doesn't see the giant exponential weight of civilization and the heat engine that civilization is heating up absolutely everything. You have to weigh all these factors in at once. And unfortunately, when you do weigh all these factors in and you see that each trend line is I'm not laughing, guys, I'm not laughing, but each trend line is in the process of exponentiating, right? And, we're kind of in a very screwed up situation. So again, as I've said before, we're witnesses to this extremely special time. And I think in a certain sense, we should feel kind of honored that we're able to be awake and to watch the oncoming train of,
Yeah, we're watching
this.
it. And our
We're
chat
watching
is
it.
our chat is having so much fun in there with how much this is going to cost. And actually, Laura says, how will they get the oil out if they put all the icebergs in, right? And Zoc says, laugh of despair. Of course, they're laugh of despair, but we're trying to keep it light. People ask me. I
Yeah.
say this all the time. How do you deal with everything? And I say, lots of counseling, lots of counseling.
Yeah.
But honestly, oh, And we had Singing Way. Hi, Singing Way. She says exponentiating. Good word. And is
Yeah.
that your word? You use that word. And then,
No,
oh, wait, lightning rod,
it's
you got to be kidding. Only the grand solar minimum can save us. We know you're kidding. We do know. Oh, and Kent's talking about the solar panel roadways. So
oh yeah,
it's
the solar panel
it's
roadways. Put
solutions
put
night.
enough of those together and we'll all
Yeah.
be saved.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd all love to think that technology can save us, and if we just do this and this and this kind of like a technology profile, we'll get the whole thing under control. Meanwhile, China is really ramping up their coal-fired plants,
Yeah.
and
Oh, read that one today.
we've been studying this global warming thing consciously like 30 years now, right? Since 1980 or so, we've been studying it. Is that 30 years or 40 years? Anyway, it's been like 30 or 40 years that we've been studying it. And in that time, the CO2, and we've been knowing that CO2 is bad. It's hot. It's not to be desired in our atmosphere, right? For very many reasons. And since the 1980s, the CO2 emissions have gone up 60% from where they were then. So we're not doing a really very good job. It doesn't really surprise me, I guess.
Hey,
That's
Book
the
Hermit
way
has a
human beings are.
question. You're right.
Hey,
Now, I don't know if this is what I want to know. At what point does the South Polar circumpolar isolation break down? Is that a thing?
well, there is a current around Antarctica, and the air and the water both circulate around Antarctica, and it's getting the actual when he says current, is he meaning, what is he meaning? Is he
Well, Book
meaning that,
Hermit, come on, tell us, help us.
is he meaning like oh, this thing wants to install on my computer,
I
how
really
annoying.
don't. It's hard when you're doing, you're getting questions from here, and I don't mean
No,
to
it's
be cutting
fine.
you
I
off.
mean,
Everybody's in on, hey guys, by the way, 71 watching and only 32 ups. Not that I ever gave a crap before, but why not? You like us? You're here with us? Come on.
that's great.
I
We have
mean, I
72
know we
watching.
don't do
That's
anything with money on this channel and we don't do anything like that, but what the hell? I want to see the likes.
Yeah, there you go. Well,
Yeah.
it's better than even last week. Last week we had 60 people and this week we have 72. So I
I don't
guess
know.
people are interested in this,
Well,
right?
Kim knows. Kim knows because she's one of our mods. She was keeping count. I don't know. I don't look at the analytics. I don't do any of that. I'm usually, you know, not the person
Yeah.
that's sitting here and doing all that. I don't really care. I mean, I care about you guys. I don't look at analytics. I don't look at any of this. It's not a business. This is a hobby. Um, but now me and Jennifer are trying to see if we can do this on Friday nights because it's a good feeling for both of us to connect. She's in Colorado, I'm in New York, and you guys are all over the world. And if I can handle it, and I'm not reliable, but this is the second Friday night, and it's great. Even though I had a horrible day, I'm here with all of you guys. You know,
Yeah, it's a good way to
Aw.
kind of come together for an hour or so, talk about these things.
And Dee Dee did say I do a good job of letting you know. Okay, all right, I guess laying in bed and going like this. I'm surprised I have nothing wrong with my thumbs. The sharing thumbs, I call them. Oh, all right, Book Hermit. Wait, he came back with if it breaks down more, uh, Antarctica cools the planet more and loses ice much faster. Is that a
Hmm.
continuation of what you were asking, Book Hermit?
Yeah. Well, we're
Oh,
we're
he says,
seeing.
I mean that oh, yeah, I missed that. I mean that it limits most heat transfer to and from Antarctica.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
all right. Well,
Right.
we'll have
Okay.
to.
So just like, okay, I know what he's talking about. So just like we
You
have
would.
Yeah, just like we have the polar vortex, which is an air mass that goes up around, where the jets fly. And that's why when you have a tailwind and you're up there and you're getting pushed when you're going from the west coast to the east coast, your trip is substantially shorter than when you're at the east coast in the United States and trying to go to the west coast. You're pushing against the headwind. That's part of the Arctic vortex and the jet stream, right?
Ah,
Yeah,
okay. I think
yeah.
he said,
So,
"Yep,
so
yep."
Yep, but I'm not done yet. We're not done yet. Truckers, you're not down yet. So, basically, what he's talking about is the polar vortex in the North Pole is broken. And the reason that it's broken is that the delta of temperatures between the North Pole and the more temperate regions is getting less and less and less. So consequently, the jet stream is getting more ragged and it's getting slower because you don't have it's not like these two air masses, the very cold of the Arctic and the more temperate regions are coming together and forming a little it keeps going around.
Right.
It's slower and it's broken, and so consequently, when the dips go up to the top of the Arctic in the jet stream, then that's when all the hot air goes from the temperate regions into the Arctic. And consequently, the same thing when those dips go down in the jet stream, it brings all the Arctic cold air. And the dips are getting longer and longer. In fact, the dips are even going to the equator in some cases, and in some cases crossing over the equator, which Paul Beckwith has seen. Like when the jet streams start crossing over the equator, that is very scary indeed. So, sorry to be so long-winded, but just as
Go
we
ahead, Amma.
have that in the North Pole, in the South Pole, it's exactly the same thing, except Antarctica is a little bit behind where the extreme melting in the North Pole is. I mean, it's bigger for one thing. It's got like 3 miles deep of ice, and Antarctica is an entire continent covered and caked with ice, but it's not immune. Ice is ice. Ice is, you get the water up to 0 degrees centigrade and start pushing that hotter water deep into the ice sheets and under the glaciers, which is what's happening in East Antarctica by the Totten Glacier. Then you're going to have temperature shifts in Antarctica and even over on West Antarctica, where the most extreme melting is happening. It's getting a lot hotter out there. So consequently, you're going to have the same thing. And the jet stream of the southern polar vortex is also going to break down. And as Antarctica warms, that jet stream, which has been a lot more stable than the northern jet stream, is going to start to slow down and get more wavy and be more irregular. And that will bring heat into the poles, and it will also bring very, very cold air very far north, because you know, consequently, the south, it'll go north.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say if it's down here, it's not up there, right? Like if we have extreme weather events here, especially in the United States, where a lot of us are, we say, oh, well, what about this global warming? It's so freaking cold here. It's like record cold. There can't be any global warming. Well, that's because the Arctic's broken apart and it's come down here. The same thing will start to happen in Antarctica. That one will take longer because it's just such a big mass of
Right.
ice. So ask him if I answered his question.
Well, I got it. He says, yes, this was my point. I hope that's
Uh-huh.
congruent with what you said. I hope that's what he was asking. And then
Mm-hmm.
Mark's comment was, well explained about the air masses and jet streams happening in the south like the north. Probably the cause of the hot air mass stuck over Australia now.
Isn't that sad? Australia is really, really burning up. Australia is
Keith's
in
here.
mega
Yeah.
drought.
Keith Boyd's with
Yeah.
us. He's from Australia. He keeps
Is
us,
he?
yes, he
It's
keeps us
very sad.
surprised of what's going on. It is. It's absolutely. It really is.
Yeah.
Trish says, Jennifer, Do
Hey,
you have a
Trish.
guess on a timeline for Blue Ocean event?
Well, that's a question that we ask a lot, and I've made some pretty bad mistakes on my guesstimates with that in the past. But it is going down. We do see the sea ice volume going down very predictably. And, I don't know when the blue ocean event is going to happen. It's not happened I mean, I don't know how long the Arctic's been frozen,
Well, we're in
thousands of
it.
years,
How do
you
I
know,
say it? I always say
no.
we're in.
But
It's a continuum. We're all.
yeah,
We're in it at different times, but it's not all. It's not totally blue. But aren't we getting the effects and extreme weather events from the
we're
jet
we're
stream?
s- Yeah, we're starting to because there is less sea ice extent and also less sea ice volume, and the Arctic Ocean is getting hotter. Just by the fact that the ice is pulling back that much,
Hmm.
we are already, I mean, the more blue ocean you have in the Arctic, the hotter it's going to get. And it affects the weather and it creates these extreme weather events that we've been seeing around the world: extreme droughts, extreme floods, extreme cold, extreme drought, extreme fires, all sorts of crazy things. For us in the northern hemisphere, it all goes back to the Arctic, and everybody wants to know, well, when's all of the
Yeah.
ice going to go away? And back in 2014, when I was first getting into this and I did the Arctic Methane Monsters Rapid Rise, I thought at that time, because I listened to Peter Wadhams, and Peter Wadhams at that time was very convinced that it was all going to go away very quickly, like maybe 2017. Well, clearly, here we are in 2019, the end of it, getting
Hmm.
into 2020. I mean, who knows? We might see our first blue ocean event in 2025. We
Hmm.
might see our first blue ocean event in 2030. And who knows if they get a fleet of these little iceberg machines up there, get 100,000 iceberg machines, which will never happen, and we kind of plaster the top of our world, maybe we can hold it together. But see, that's not going to happen. And we all know it's not going to happen. But it's kind of a fun idea to think about. We have to have happy things to think about in the midst of this climate catastrophe and our biosphere breakdown, because let's keep in mind we are living in the beginning of the sixth grade extinction on Earth. And it's my belief that when all is said and done, probably just cockroaches will be left, certainly not us. We depend on so much
Cockroaches.
working. I know, right? They're very resilient.
Bionic.
Um, I mean, who's to say how this thing is going to play out? But we all know it's not going to be good. And it will be the blue ocean event, which is when there's less than a million square kilometers of sea ice in the Arctic, which sounds like a lot, but then when you only have a million kilometers, it's so thin anyway, it just turns into this like mush, right? Unless you have an ice making submarine, which doesn't make ice
I'm getting a
fast enough.
tattoo of an ice. I'm gonna get a new tattoo right there. Ice making stuff.
Right,
So
right. You can get
listen,
like these,
no,
yeah,
what little icebergs, little iceberg
yeah,
tattoos.
yeah.
Laura had an interesting comment, Jen, and just tell me. I don't mean to cut you off. I think there's a lag, and
No,
I
not
get
at
okay.
all.
Laura says, and hi, Laura. I can't remember. I think either Guy or Paul said it takes about a year for the methane to circulate the planet and start its upward heating. Does anyone know?
I don't know. I know that methane
Hmm.
has a lot less of a lag time than carbon dioxide. So a year, well, if they said so, I mean, who am I to say, right? I mean, if Guy and Paul said so, then they are very much attuned to the latest research. So that
Mm-hmm.
very well might be true. Um, Carbon dioxide has a lag time of like 10 to 15 years from the time it's emitted to the time that that molecule reaches its full heating potential. So if they say methane takes only a year, then that's probably about right.
Okay. Well, Mark gives us a good one. The situation is dire, but humor can be an appropriate coping mechanism, and it is with me, and it's been with me even before I knew we were WASF. It's always been, even in the worst of times, a little bit of humor and a little bit of laughing. You can't help. I can't help it. I think a natural
Yeah.
born goofball. We had some when we were together
Well,
in your house. We were laughing the whole time. Oh my
yeah,
God.
absolutely. I mean, the thing is, you have to laugh in the face of this specter that's before you. I mean, those of us who look at the news, God, how depressing is that? Just because the news is bad doesn't mean your sense of humor and your desire for laughter goes away. So,
No.
we do laugh a lot on this show. That's true. It doesn't mean we're glib or
No.
insensitive or
Or two
any of
bougie
that. It
broads
just
that just don't know anything. It's not true.
Oh yeah, we were boozing it up last week, but we're not boozing it up this week.
Well,
We're
or
totally,
bougie,
here.
bougie. We are, who called us that? I think it was Lord Hugh. Use the word.
Oh, was
He
it?
called
We
us
were
bougie, and look where he lives.
Oh yeah.
Yacht. So
Yeah.
John
Well,
D has this blue ocean event is less than a million square kilometers. Where does this figure comes from? It seems as valid as an
that's
economist saying 2C is bad. Oh,
right. Well, it's an arbitrary, you're right, absolutely right, John D. It's an arbitrary number that somebody came up with and somebody agreed to, and now they are saying a blue ocean event is when you have less than a million square kilometers of ice left in the Arctic.
yeah.
So, that may be an arbitrary figure, but that's what they're calling it. I guess I would say a blue ocean event is when you don't have any ice in the Arctic. That would be like better, but however they want to measure it. It's going to be very interesting to see and watch this unfold because that diagram that Sam Carana puts out,
Mm-hmm.
the diagram, what is it, like going down the drain, that whole little swirl of doom or whatever it is. We're seeing
Circling
the
the
Arctic sea
drain.
ice
Yeah.
circling the drain, right? I mean, you look at it over the last, like, 30 years or so, and you see that the Arctic sea ice extent is
Mm-hmm.
getting progressively lower. There are trends, there are peaks and valleys, but over time, the trend line points squarely down. And a lot of us tend to think that a blue ocean event is very much a tipping point for planet Earth. It's certainly notable. It's certainly something like if your satellite takes a picture of it, instead of there being like a lot of ice in the Arctic Sea,
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a blue space, a really big blue space,
Do you?
you know, and then the only ice that will be left in the Arctic at that time, the biggest ice mass is Greenland. And so Greenland, while it continues to melt down, will be the center of the Arctic vortex and the jet stream at that time. So, then the remaining remnants of our destroyed jet stream will kind of revolve around Greenland because that's the only center of cold mass that's going to be left.
Wow.
Yeah.
Book. Excuse me. Book Hermit said people worry too much about methane. He says it has a very narrow absorption spectrum. I'm not sure.
Well, I think what he means is it doesn't have a long lifetime. It
Mm.
has a shorter lifetime. It remains in the atmosphere a lot shorter than carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide it's a very nasty thing and it can stay in the atmosphere for thousands of years. It doesn't really degrade. It's a pretty stable molecule. Methane, on the other hand, it comes out as methane, CH4, four hydrogens to one carbon molecule, and it very quickly kind of breaks off and it degrades over time to actually carbon dioxide, which is, also bad. So, but he's right in that methane doesn't hang around as long. But then think about it, if you've got methane explosions going off in Barrow, Alaska, and all through the Arctic shelf in Siberia, that Siberian Arctic shelf. All the and coming out of the permafrost itself, because the permafrost is getting hot and turning into permamush and
Yeah.
all rot like a dead animal, like a
Mm.
freezer, like the freezer with the door open and all your meat is going to go rotten and microby and all that.
Microbe. Well, I have
Yeah.
another one from Aaron who's asking. This is good good stuff. What will the effect be for North America when the ice-free Arctic happens and the jet stream goes nuts? I'm still a little unclear.
Yeah, I don't know that I actually have an answer for it either, but I can say that probably we're going to have more extreme weather events, and the whole thing will just probably go more haywire. There probably is going to be greater flooding. Um, Couple of things to note. Hot air, as the temperature of the atmosphere goes up, right? Hot air can hold a lot more water than cold air.
Yeah.
And also, hot water holds a lot less oxygen than cold water. So, right now, the Arctic is one of the most oxygen rich places
Okay.
because cold water holds a lot more oxygen, and there's remarkable life that occurs under the sea, and it's just that's where all that krill is down in and near Antarctica as well. There's like all sorts of algae and planktons and things like that have developed for the cold climates, and that's why all these animals like whales and so forth go up to feed in these very cold waters. The waters of the north, because they've been cold, have always been very, very nutrient rich, and the waters of the hot waters in the equator don't have many nutrients in them. So it's just something interesting to note. So as the atmosphere gets hotter and more water, like 7% more water humidity can be held in the atmosphere for every degree raised,
Wow,
right?
7%
Mhm.
more for every single degree. Ooh,
Yeah,
uncomfortable.
that's right. And so what can happen if you have 7% more water than you used to have? Well, you could have like freaking rain bombs, right? If that very saturated water, hot air hits a cold mass, like bumps up against a jet stream, it will just like let itself go, like just peeing all over itself all at once, just like boom, and um that's a flood event right there.
Yes.
Think think of what happened in Ellicott, Maryland twice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Twice Ellicott, Maryland was washed out. And both times it was these very strange atmospheric rivers that were hitting up against a cold mass. And it just, so we're going to see like more and more of these big flood events for sure. And I would say that within our lifetimes, we're going to see some crazy, crazy events that are going to be happening, coming to a planet near you,
Yeah,
meaning
we're seeing
here.
them now. I mean,
We're
come
seeing
on,
them
we're seeing
now.
them now. We're
We're
seeing them
seeing
even where we live. I mean, the tornado was not normal where I live 2 years ago. It just wasn't the kind of thing that, we expected here. And,
them.
everybody's got something going on out there in our chat. Steven says, our raccoons here are still coming out to eat when it's below 32 degrees. Good thing there were also lots of acorns for the deer this winter. I didn't see a lot of acorns this year, but again, I'm not out there hiking in the woods anymore. But well, listen, guys, this has been wonderful. We have been almost an hour. Holy crap!
Yeah. Can you
I
imagine?
started feeling better, a little better as the time went on, and this has been very engaging. Let's see who anybody more. Oh, Copy Cooney, you came in late. Hi, Rick. And Rick says, oh, wait, I got to take this one off. Rick Dorsky, hello. And all that extra humidity in the atmosphere is another major greenhouse gas. Well, yeah, water, greenhouse
Yes. Well,
gas.
that's right. I mean, water in the atmosphere is a greenhouse gas. So like everything turns into a greenhouse gas practically. It's kind of stunning. And the more feedbacks and self-reinforcing feedback loops that you look at, the more you see. And then you realize they're all connected, and the whole thing is kind of like turning into a big clump of disaster.
Clump of disaster. At the and is that a great place to end at the clump of disaster? I feel like a clump of
Clump of
disaster.
disaster.
I'll be laying in bed as my clump of disaster clumps into takes out. Forget it, guys. And by the way, I really wasn't drinking wine. It's just water in a red glass. I didn't have any wine. And then
Sandy.
I'm such a novice. I mean, not even a novice. I'm so stupid after all these years. And I was a bartender at one time in my life. The last one bottle of wine, I broke the corkscrew in the top.
Well, well, Sandy, can we cheers here? Can we have
Here,
a little
yes.
toast?
You have a blue glass. I
Fire.
have a red glass.
Go. Cheers.
Cheers! Holiday cheers. Hell
Holiday
yeah.
cheers. Sandy and I are drinking water today.
Yeah, last week, yeah. But we'll do it. We'll try to. What's the date next Friday? Next Friday, because Christmas is what? Let me see what the date is next Friday, and see can we do a show on the 27th? Is that the Friday the 27th? That's after Christmas. So we'll see if we can schedule one if, everything is always how I'm feeling. What's Jennifer, are they going to call her and make her have to work all kinds of craziness? What do you think,
Yeah.
guys?
Well,
Do you
we'll
like this? Well, we'll hear them. Oh, and Groot said, Jennifer, I remember when you told us when you flew over Iceland years ago. I think it was Iceland and Greenland. Yeah,
both
that's
of
how it
them.
all
Yeah.
started for her.
Yeah, and it was kind of one of those, and I won't belabor this because I always talk about it, but you're right. I mean, that was an awakening, visceral, emotional awakening moment. Flying over Greenland right after the Olympics, I had gone to the closing ceremonies just like 2 days before, my sister and we sat right over the Olympic torch in that big arena. And 2 days later, I got on the plane, and it was
Mhm.
like the very beginning of September of 2012. And 2012, all of us ice buffs out there, we all know what happened in 2012. 90% of Greenland ice surface experienced melting on the surface of the ice, which, usually it had been stable up until then. And the Arctic sea ice extent pulled back to a record level in 2012. So when I went over Greenland, that thing, September's like the high melt season, the end of summer, and Greenland was just a wreck. It was just the whole bloody place
That's
was
where it all
melting.
started
That's where it all started. But
for
sometimes you
you.
have to create, it is for me, that's where it all
Yeah.
started. And that, because it created an emotional reaction. I looked at it and I was just like, holy cow, this thing is all melting down. I can't believe it. And it really galvanized me. And sometimes you need a cattle prod, right? And so I got my cattle prod, and that was that
And
experience. And
living
from then
there is an experience. Torstein lives there, but
on, right?
for the indigenous people that have been there and who are losing their homes, I guess sometime him to we got to get him on and talk to him about what's actually happening there. So,
Absolutely. We should bring
yeah.
Torstein on the show sometime.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And he can talk about his Climate Crush TV at
Ye-
frozen.earth.
I love Frozen.Earth. If you guys haven't gone to Frozen.Earth,
It's
go
neat.
there. Torsten's webpage is edgy, perceptive,
Yeah.
insightful, sacrilegious,
Can walk around
just
with the headphones on and just, if you can't watch everything, you can just be listening all day long while you're doing other things and learning.
right.
Like when you're doing
Yeah.
the housework that I hate to do, but singing way. The tragedy that 10% of humans can feel that awakening from hearing others' experience, but 90% must have a firsthand experience or trust the experts. Ooh, that's a heavy statement. That's a heavy
Yeah.
statement.
It's because people don't believe science anymore. Science is out of vogue, and most people just depend on what they see around them, and they assume that what they see around them in their very local area, and especially the people who are sort of predisposed to be deniers, they're like, "Oh, that's just garbage. I don't
Yeah,
see any. Look, it's snowing." And if you don't want to look at it and that's what you see, then that's what you're going to see. And there's no amount of nothing can convince you otherwise.
it's hard.
So,
I was going to
and
do my little weekly update on the deniers, but we don't have time. And his name William Happer. Oh my gosh! But we're not going to do. That's a whole other show. I already did that show.
maybe, maybe another time we
I
can
did
go
that
into
show
that.
already. But yeah,
Did you?
they get under my skin. These people. Oh, they get under
I
my skin.
know. It gets under my
Okay.
skin too.
Well, everybody. Oh, wait. Let me just make sure this is on here for him. Okay, there's the right. A different one. Okay, it'll be on there. I don't know why it changed Torstein, but there's the address. Everyone, Jennifer, you have a parting gift for our audience?
Enjoy life now. Keep your eyes wide open, What do they say? Eyes wide shut or something like that. I
In the
mean,
movie?
don't look at it all the time because it'll drive you crazy. But it's really interesting to look at this stuff. There's new phenomena happening all the time. So let's
Mm-hmm.
continue the investigation on these, the breakdown of our biosphere and the Arctic sea ice, going away and everything like that. We can discuss this on an ongoing basis and, enjoy life in the meantime because it's precious.
It is precious. And at that, I will say I'm really feel that I am in some kind of spiritual way blessed to be here with all of you and to be able to do this. And Torstein, I know it never changed. It was we're talking about this address thing. We had a little thing going about it. It's frozen.earth, but it was the beginning. The is it the HT whatever. It's there. He put it up, and I'm going to put it up one more time if it's there,
Yeah.
right here.
Put
Yep,
it in the show notes
there
in
we
the
go.
video.
There we go. And the
Uh,
chat, he put so much work into this thing. It is,
he did.
yeah, I
Such
know,
a war.
I know, I know, I know. It's great. Okay, everybody.
Yes.
Well, I have to. He says either someone is stupid or my IQ is 12,000. Maybe it's just me. Um, it is. And I will end at that. Hey, I can laugh at myself. Guys, peace. We really love you. Thank you for coming so very much. And we'll see you next
Thanks for
week.
hanging out
And
with
have a
us.
wonderful holiday. Yeah. Have a wonderful holiday, whatever you do for it. And there you go. Mwah.
All right. Mwah. Thank you, Sandy. Love you.
Love you too.